Fort McMurray is the petroleum hub of Canada. Canada is, depending on who you're asking, the fourth or fifth largest petroleum producer in the world. So it's up there with Venezuela and Iran and the United States. Major producer. 90% of that petroleum comes out of Fort McMurray, which is a remote boreal city of 100,000 people, about 800 miles due north of Bozeman, Montana, where we are right now. And it's up there in central northern Alberta. The boreal forest is that giant green swath of forest that runs all the way through Alaska, all the way through northern Canada, across Iceland, all the way across Scandinavia, all the way across Russia, where it's called the taiga. It's this giant green ring that runs around the top of the globe like a wreath. And it's very flammable, and it regenerates itself through fire. So there are tree species in there like black spruce whose cones won't open unless they are heated to temperatures higher than what sunlight alone can generate. So they need to burn. It's a phoenix of ecosystems. It's also the wettest ecosystem on Earth. And, we think of Brazil or, the tropical jungle, but there's more water, more rivers, more muskeg bogs in the boreal forest than anywhere else on Earth. And so it's a very wet place, which is hard to wrap your head around when you see the way it burns, because 1,000 square mile fire up there doesn't even make the news. Canada is the second biggest country in the world. It's bigger than the United States. Only Russia is bigger. And a lot of that is very sparsely inhabited forest that burns like hell. So Fort McMurray is a petroleum town built in the middle of this very flammable ecosystem. And they're not drilling oil up there. It ain't Texas. It ain't the Gulf of Mexico. It's bitumen that they are mining. They are digging this bitumen, which is basically the same stuff that you would seal your driveway with. It is a thick, tarry substance that, in the case of Alberta, is in this matrix of sand. It's unbelievably difficult to deal with. Pretty much no other economy besides Canada's would bother with it. And it's really what, Canada's sort of the Avis of petroleums. They try harder, but they don't do quite as well as Hertz does. And so they are mining this stuff out, and you can't burn it. You can't send it to the refinery that way. You've got to melt it with billions of cubic feet of natural gas, basically every day. And that only turns it to a liquid. It's still not anything that is usable as a fuel. It has to be refined again. And so you're basically cracking these molecules. Petroleum people will understand this, but you're basically trying to render out these, usable diesel or benzene or whatever, and all of that takes more fire. And so you're using colossal quantities of natural gas just to turn this into something that we can manage, let alone burn or sell. So, huge amounts of it. It's the dirtiest petroleum project in the world. It's also the most environmentally destructive, in the sense that in order to access this, you have to tear up the forest and mine into the earth. And this is the largest strip mine on Earth. It's bigger than the Bingham Canyon and in Utah, and it's bigger than the Fimiston Super Pit in Western Australia. You can see it from outer space, not from the space station. You can see it from 6,000 miles above planet Earth. You can, if you know what you're looking for. And the best way I've ever heard it described was this electrician who was working up there, not a poet, but when I asked him, what was the most amazing thing about working in Fort McMurray, which is legendary for its insane overtime, its very high wages, the freezing cold temperatures, gigantic machinery. Everything is sort of extreme and oversized up there, kind of Alaska-sized. And he didn't mention any of those things. He said what blew my mind was the view from the airplane window, the scar on the side of the face of the earth. And, this is spontaneous, found poetry coming out of this guy who's no poet, but That's what it is. It is a giant scar on the side of the face of the Earth that you can see from space. And this town on May 3rd, 2016, one of the wealthiest zip code, postal codes, if you will, in the nation of Canada, was completely overrun by a wildfire in a single day, and driving the largest, most rapid evacuation due to fire in modern times. This was May 3rd, 2016. And it was absolutely shocking because this is the most can-do city in all of Fort McMurray. There's more heavy equipment up there. There's more earth-moving, earth-changing equipment up there than almost anywhere on the continent. And huge trucks, 3 stories tall. Tires are 13 feet in diameter. They weigh 400 tons when they're empty. And there are hundreds of these things running around up there. And in half a day, the entire city was evacuated because of this fire that came out of this kind of scrubby, boreal black spruce and aspen that rarely gets above 50 feet tall. And yet, on that day, May 3rd, the temperature record for that date was broken by 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The relative humidity that day was 12%. And I didn't really know what that meant until I started looking around at other places in the world where 12% is a normal humidity. Where 12% is a normal humidity is Death Valley in the month of July. That's where 12% humidity is normal. Now you transpose that 1,500 miles north into the wettest, most flammable biome on Earth. And you are not going to get a wildfire. You are going to get an explosive firestorm event.
I think what you're impressing upon us right now is the truly just like mind-boggling, catastrophic thing that is, at the core of this book. It's not the fire, it's the conditions that birth it.
Yeah.
They're a fire burning a bunch of dry stuff, very believable. The conditions that are necessary to create that dry stuff in this particular environment to this scale are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
There's another thing that's incredibly evolved in the events that are to follow, that being, and we didn't talk about this last night in our in our chat at the Country Bookshelf just because I didn't have time, but there's an experiment that was done where they were comparing the type of housing and the type of furniture that you might see in a modern household in this kind of environment.
Yeah.
And what they would call like legacy furniture, basically antiques.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. Underwriters Laboratories, pretty responsible, nonpartisan consumer protection group that tests products for safety and functionality. Did a test, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where they were looking at how different types of furniture burned. And they were noticing, most modern furniture is made one way or another from petroleum products, nylon fabric, polyurethane, stuffing, a lot of plastic, a lot of carpets are, made from nylon. The floor might be some kind of laminate. There's all these glues, it's not just made from timbers anymore. Even the walls are made from plywood, which is full of flammable glues. So the modern house is a very petrochemically heavy place and thus extraordinarily flammable. And they wanted to demonstrate this. And they did it by creating 2 living room scenarios, one with, as you say, legacy furniture. And this would mean solid wood sofas and chairs and bookshelves, a wool carpet, cotton upholstery, lace curtains, stuff that you'd see in grandma's house. And then next to it was the modern living room that most of us live in, with the nylon and the polyurethane stuffing and all that kind of thing. And what they did is they set a timer and they knocked over a candle in the sofa of each room. They were basically identical rooms. And for the first couple of minutes, you see a fire slowly growing in the cushions of these respective sofas. Mm-hmm. And the only difference we see is in the modern room with the more petrochemical heavy upholstery is the smoke is a lot blacker. But anyone could have come in with a bucket or a fire extinguisher and put this out. Around 2.5, 3 minutes, these fires begin to qualitatively differentiate. The one in the legacy, the old-fashioned room, is still burning in a normal way, a non-explosive way that, you know, even a child could probably smother with a blanket. Something else is already starting to happen. This is just after 2.5 or 3 minutes. You know, the time it takes to go to the bathroom or go to the fridge and make a sandwich. It's starting to billow black smoke. The fire is now almost out of control. And what we see is as the smoke is billowing and the heat is building inside this room, there's a moment right after 3 minutes, around 3:20 or 3:40. Again, these are differences of 10 and 20 seconds, you know, the time that it's just taken me to describe this. When suddenly the modern room explodes into flame. Completely, floor to ceiling flames, and is suddenly billowing black smoke. It looks like a refinery fire, because that's what it is. But it's in your home, and everybody in that room would be dead. Meanwhile, there's this parallel fire going. It's a sofa on fire. You know, honey, you know, bring that bucket in, you know, we'll put some water on it. It takes 25 minutes for the old-fashioned legacy living room to be burning with the intensity that this other room achieved in 3.5 minutes. And that is because petroleum products are super volatile. And so, you know, when you heat up leather or cotton, you know, there are hydrocarbons in there and it'll all burn. But when you heat up running shoes and Lululemon yoga pants and nylon curtains, they are off-gassing much more volatile hydrocarbons. It's much more like a gas can full of vapor. And so as the heat in the sofa is releasing all these super volatile hydrocarbons from everything around it, the room is filling with this critical mass of explosive vapor. And at 3 minutes and 35 seconds, the whole thing blows.
For the full episode we got this clip from, click that top video there. For more clips, click that playlist right there. You got time for one more, man. Tell them there's traffic or something. Ooh, tell them there was a bear. I was gonna be like, how big was the bear? It's a good excuse.